It was by ship that Britain came to take possession of Australia. We colonised the territory from the sea. So it was fitting that the 200th birthday present to Australia should be a ship. This is Young Endeavour. She's about to become Australia's first national training vessel, and thousands of young people will learn their skills aboard her. Though perhaps not quite so adventurously as these trainees who took 4 months to sail the brigantine from the Isle of Wight to Sydney. The Prince and Princess heard their stories and then went ashore, she displaying a newfound skill with gangplanks, like this controlled slide. They did their first walkabout here, successfully disguising their jet lag after 27 hours in the air.
How long have you been here for? You've just been here for...
There was a lot of emotion around and requests to be touched. Young Endeavour sailed off. The trainees had a last party to attend, but then all Sydney has been one enormous party for a week.
Well, good day, everybody. Well, good day, everybody. Well, good day, everybody. And how would you be? Have you got a good spot in the shade of a tree? Because I want to put in front of you a bit of a yarn. And I'll ask you to listen. It'll do you no harm. Woo!
The Bicentennial hype has produced a souvenir industry with the accent on convict origins, and much of it is in dubious taste. The Aboriginal people, of course, think none of this is funny. They have declared Bicentennial year a year of mourning for the loss of their lands, the loss of the ancient dreamtime. From all over Australia, they came to Sydney to protest. The royals discovered that the Aboriginal problem was to find an unlikely outlet at a big concert that night. Having disposed of various elderly pop stars, the closing emotional sequence featured children singing of Australian freedoms and racial harmony. Then the actor Jack Thompson expressed the feelings of a growing number of white Australians.
But I believe that we are beginning to come to some sort of understanding about this land. I believe that it has taken us something like 200 years to come to an understanding that the Aborigines had for well over 40,000 years. Australia...
The all-white audience clapped their agreement. And the Prince told Thompson, "Those are exactly my sentiments. We have a lot to learn from the Aboriginal people and their history. People all over the world could learn from them." Unaware of this support, the Aboriginals in the camp at Mrs. Macquarie's Point, overlooking the place where the white man first landed, settled down for the night. It was the eve of the year of mourning. Sydney Head's the entrance to perhaps the greatest harbour in the world on the morning of January the 26th, 1988, all prepared for Australia's finest birthday. And 200 years on, to the hour and more or less to the minute, the recreation of the first convict fleet rounded the South Head from Botany Bay. Now surrounded by a joyous, haphazard welcome of small boats, 9 of these brave ships had made the journey from Portsmouth. There had been storm, financial trouble, and a little bickering over 8 months and 21,000 nautical miles. Now they were here. The original First Fleet probably had a rougher time of it, transporting 756 convicts, the oldest a woman of 80, the youngest a 9-year-old chimney sweep. HMS Sirius led the fleet, a 24-gun man-of-war, named for the dog star of the southern heavens. The dangerously small HMS Supply was the only other naval vessel. The fleet was commanded by Captain Arthur Phillip, who became the first governor of New South Wales. He was a small, dour man. His crew described him as waist-high to a water butt. Quite what Captain Phillip would have made of this reception, I've no idea. He was a man who kept himself to himself, unlike the nation he founded. They said there were 4,000 boats on the water, but no one really knew or cared. And to that number, one more boat was added, the Admiral's barge to ferry the guests of honour to the official ceremony of birthday outside the Opera House. The Prime Minister, Mr. Bob Hawke, stressed the need for commitment on the part of the people of the lucky country.
The commitment to Australia is the one thing needful to be a true Australian. And today, my fellow Australians, at this historic place and at this historic hour, let us all renew that commitment.
The Prince, who regards himself as an honorary Australian, talked with much affection of his school days here.
As it happened so long ago, many of you may not realize that part of my own education took place here in Australia. Quite frankly, it was by far the best part. While I was here, I had the pommy bits bashed off me, like chips off an old block, and the results are only too obvious. I keep coming back for more, and it is always a special pleasure. But my wife and I are particularly glad to be here this year, on this great day, to help you, as if the Aussies needed help in anything, to celebrate your good fortune and to wish you well for a future that holds out such great promise.
After lunch, they boarded HMAS Cook to take the salute at the Parade of Sail. Agility was again displayed. There were 174 tall ships, the largest fleet ever assembled in the Southern Hemisphere. It was a marvellous sight, though there was the occasional unnerving cannon shot. The parade lasted nearly 4 hours. All Sydney watched and will probably never see its like again. Finery was the order of the evening for Melbourne's Australia Day ball, the Princess in a backless number and with her hair up. The ride on the escalator displayed the bustle at the back as they rose to join the elite of a city renowned for its snobbery and its high proportion of Edna Everidges. The skirt had a split in it, as the delighted owners of the electronic flashes quickly discovered. So into the dance, pausing only to hitch up the bodice. This has become something of a tradition on these Australia tours. It seems as if nothing ever changes. You could say the dancing hasn't changed, only the dancers. Outside Melbourne's School of Music, it was very hot, one of those lousy spells which afflict this city with temperatures of over 100 degrees. Hot enough, even under a wide sombrero, to produce a bead of sweat on the upper lip. Certainly hot enough to burn the bald spot. As a consolation, the Prince was congratulated on his speech at the bicentennial ceremony.
I remember, sorry.
Thank you for the beautiful speech.
Oh, you're very kind.
I listened to it twice.
Did you?
Yeah.
Twice? I'm very flattered.
Now look at me, as soon as I put my hand up, put your both on the street, and sit up nicely and smile. Now come on now, you're right now, big one. Pause now. Now big long note.
Don't be fooled by the accent. This is Professor Henri Touzeau, who teaches the cello here. He's also one of the characters of Melbourne.
You must be ready because we're going to get someone on the door. Where, as they enter, we should be playing. Do you think it's a good idea? It's a good idea. Yeah. So when they practically come to the door, we'll get going because it's only last 4 bars. That's all they can play. Practice. Huh? Yes.
Actually, he was teasing. His students managed rather more than 4 bars. But Professor Touzeau had a plan. He wanted the Prince to play the favorite instrument of his school days. The Prince, always suspicious on these occasions, thought he was being set up. So the Prince sat down and got a gentle reminder of the old skills. What followed was not exactly a recital, but it wasn't a scrape either. The notes were clear and properly bowed. Then the wily professor tried the princess. Her rearguard action of coyness was bound to end in surrender, and she knew it. The most surprising thing, perhaps, was her choice of party piece, the slow movement of Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto. She positively scuttled from the room. Whether her embarrassment was real or mock, only she knows. Officially, this is locomotive 621, the Duke of Edinburgh, but it's known as the cockle train because that used to be the cargo in the days of steam. It was saved from the scrapyard by railway buffs and now hauls tourists from Adelaide to Goolwa at the mouth of the Murray River. And on this day, the cockle train recruited one more railway buff, and possibly a long-suffering wife. Of course, there are some things no one can resist. The princess gave the impression of jumping to safety. So, having had his fun with the engine, the journey could begin. Along the coast of South Australia went the train. It was pleasant enough country, but the temperature was over 100, there was no air conditioning, and the seats were plastic. The beaches looked even more tempting than usual. It was hotter still when they arrived at Goolwa to open the £2 million Signal Point Centre, which tells the story of the Great Murray River from its source to the sea. What they didn't know was that they had to listen to 3 very long speeches. It was a time discreetly to mop the brow, to bite the lip, to whisper the odd word, and to think cooling thoughts. By now, in the crowd, they were going down like ninepins. And try as hard as she might, a slump was setting in. The walkabout was accomplished in a temperature of 106 degrees. The organisers of this visit appeared to ignore the fact that the last week of January is always the hottest week of the year here. Out on the river, it was mercifully cooler on board the splendid recreation of a 19th century paddle steamer. Then a first for just about everyone: paddle steamer racing. Since they can only go about 3 knots, it's a bit short on drama, but it is a very pretty form of racing. They even had a checkered flag for the prince to wave for the winner. On the way home, the princess went by herself to the bow, and for a moment she was as still as a ship's figurehead. The heat seemed to affect other people too. In Wollongong, a group of Aboriginal rights protesters shouted boring at the prince, and that was before he started to speak. He came back at them smartly.
Before anybody shouts boring, I'm about to make the most boring speech I've ever made.
When they began hurling insults, he deflected them quite neatly.
Could you repeat yourselves? I didn't quite catch it. Say it again, I didn't hear.
The problem of boredom occurred rather more markedly at a reception in Wollongong Town Hall. There were over 500 hands to shake. The whole of Wollongong society was here, and keeping the smile in place wasn't easy. And still they came, relentlessly seeking that moment they'll tell the grandchildren about, though the princess took a slightly different view. Slowly the room filled up, and that's an awful lot of handshakes. This is Terrigal Beach on the Central Coast near Sydney, where this afternoon they staged the Bicentennial Surf Carnival.
Please give them a warm welcome to Terrigal Beach.
They brought the Prince and Princess by Land Rover along the sand.
Take it easy!
But it was not a good day for the prestige of the Rover Group. The wretched thing got caught up in a piece of string in the sand. It had to be pushed out to ironic cheers. The rowing competition was the big attraction, though the experts said the waves were really not big enough. When the champagne came round, one great advantage of being royal was made clear. You don't have to bring your cold box like other folk. No eskies for them. The rowers had turned for home, but some were not going to make it. The princess was asked to present the winners with the Princess of Wales plate, a task she relished for obvious reasons.
Please give them a warm round of applause.
So much so that she was only too happy to join in the team photograph.
Well, now, what a great photograph.
A certain amount of chatting up seemed to be going on.
Now flashed around the world.
So a week that began with the sea on Australia's 200th birthday most fittingly ended with the sea.